Boa noite a todos.
Good evening to all. We are here to talk about this theme that is so important, which is the Esoteric Glossary. And it is important for us to remember that we are beings in evolution. We are beings who need to find many things again. And the glossary is a book, a work that can help us to find this place of synthesis, of renewal, of expansion, much more than a mental and intellectual consultation. So the themes we will talk about today are related to tests and challenges under the perspective of race and hierarchical lineages. So in each sharing, in each lecture, this is a public sharing. We will include different words that are in the glossary to collaborate in this intention of synthesis that we need today. In the last century, two events happened, the two great world wars, which catalyzed the awakening of humanity towards the searching of a meaning which was not foreseen in that moment. This awakening had not been foreseen for that moment, but the universe always uses even that which is seemingly not constructive to promote some evolutionary situation. So in the two first great world wars, we as humanity were led into an abrupt process of search for a meaning, for awakening for other realities, and this catalyzed a whole movement to which humanity was not entirely prepared on many planes. So after 1988, we entered as a planet, and we had the entry law of purification in the glossary, which helps us to understand this, a moment of intensification of the law of purification in a more definitive way, so that all pending processes on many levels of humanity evolution and of the planet were led to a liberation, a synthesis, and a preparation for a new level, a new moment on the world level. So in this year of 2025, we are in a very particular moment because we have around 130 serious conflicts in the world, two which are more prominent, which are more in the news, and this leads us to the same intensity of search. And these lectures, these public lectures, helps our consciousnesses as a whole to awaken to something beyond these conflictive realities that seem that they will endure for a long time or will even be intensified because they are part of a great moment, a process of definition that humanity is going through as a whole. We are in a mental race, therefore our maximum filter as a race nowadays is the mind. Our mind works based on memory and remembrance, and that which is interpretation. So two terms that we use, which are tests and challenges, would not have this connotation that spiritually, the connotation that we human beings give to them, like victimism, increasing things, enhancing things, making it a painful process. However, without tests and challenges, as we'll see today, under the perspective of the glossary, our consciousness would be crystallized to the point it has reached, and evolution would just be a theory for us. So today we are going to mention some entries that are in the Esoteric Glossary. The book can be found in the official webpage of Irdin publisher in Portuguese. So it's Lineages how we can awaken to them on the global level to all, tests what the human condition is, because it's important to understand the human condition, not to lose the proportion of this human foundation that we are experiencing today, and from this evolve. Deny it is not a solution, it has never been, and those who have denied it on other occasions find it reinforced, because it is something that is part of the evolutionary process to purify it, to transcend it, to elevate it to a different condition. What we call onozone energy, which we saw in the previous lecture, the archetypes, matrices, which are condensations of the one source that would help us very much to raise our consciousness from this relationship with that which is around us and reach other expressions of life, evolutionary lives, the kingdoms and nature, something very important that should not be minimized or restricted to this matter or this approach that is environmentalist or ecological. It's a much more profound subject, and this is why it affects so much. However, generally humanity stays in this part that is more on the periphery of this relationship and inner life. Everything that is expressed in this system of world, planes and dimensions that we participate in are expressions of that which we call the energies of rays. So these rays are subdivisions or specific expressions of the one energy, and they mold everything that exists. So the forms of nature, our inner worlds, our temperament, everything is always permeated by one or more energies of ray. So this composes and forms everything that exists, and also permeates and determines the qualities, the attributes, the tendencies. And even though it may seem something very basic on a certain level of this environment, of this classical spiritual environment, let us say, in the practice we see that we don't assimilate this, so much so that oftentimes we are going through the situations in a difficult way, which are typical in our immaturity in our relationship with the race. And lineages that accompany this logic of the race are matrices that exist in the universe for the evolution of human consciousness as a whole. So the wholes are the ones that mold these expressions, and lineages are archetypes, goes higher matrices that humanity as a whole, that we as spirits need to develop to coexist with the universe in a harmonious way, in a constructive way. And these lineages determine and lead the evolution of human spirit, and this is why they are also important in our understanding also. So therefore this work with the lineages happens on the spiritual plane, on a more profound plane, and eventually at some point of our incarnation, of our incarnations, it is projected or reflected or let itself known also to our conscious part. However, the lineage is a spiritual reality. It's not a human material matter on the external standpoint. It's very important for us to understand this. So we have 8 lineages that are known today, which again are these matrices that form the human spirit, so that it's the relationship of the human spirit with the universe and the worlds, where this spirit is evolving and going through and participating, may be constructive within a group, a whole. So we have the lineage of the contemplatives, the lineage of the healers, the mirrors, the governors, the kingdomnists, the warriors or servants, the sages, prophets or instructors. It's the same lineage, and the priests. Some of these definitions of words eventually lead us to memories or thought forms about these words. So it's very important in this sort of content we can try to keep our minds open, put our prejudice aside so that we can enter the energy of what this means, the energy that is flowing in the channel of instruction that we build together, and we can then receive some sort of impulse. So for us to be able to commune, and everything that is spiritual and real in our evolution will be a gradual process. It's always a gradual process. This is why this work, the work founded by Trigueirinho, has awakening, evolution, and expansion of consciousness as a basis, as a foundation. Because this is a gradual process, it's not an abrupt process. Just a few individuals went through abrupt processes on the planet throughout centuries and were able to sustain this awakening throughout time. Even evolved beings have always developed processes in a gradual way. So with this premise, we should know and value the traces and reflections of this experience in our daily lives. Because if we are waiting for an abrupt movement that will completely change overnight our current state, we will feel a great frustration instead of feeling a great gratitude for each day become ever more familiarized with our inner worlds and with what they mean. It would bring a lot of peace and the correct proportion of the steps we must take, the tests and challenges we need to experience rather than the ones we need to prevent. So we should understand that the right and spiritual psychology oftentimes contradicts the psychology of victimism, suffering, challenges. Tests are something negative. We should be very careful again with our interpretation on situations. So there is a distance between that which we are experiencing and that which we should experience. There is this point which is not a fixed point, that group of states of consciousness we are experiencing today, and that which is foreseen in our evolution. So it's a combination of this current moment with that which we are supposed to reach, or that which we are should be led to reach, is what we call a step which needs to be accompanied with a test and a challenge. So it's important to understand this, how essential this is for our evolution, so that that which on our day-to-day puts us in a test and a challenge, which could be an interpretation from us. Not that it is consider it as something negative when this is the hand that is extended for us to be able to take that step. However, if we interpret it or understand it in a different way, we will reject this hand and will be crystallized in the current point we are to be found. And then we could ask ourselves, but what's the problem we are in to remain in the point we are? No problem. The problem is that we exist to evolve. A plant is in continuous mutation. A seed put in contact with a stimuli begins to evolve. Animals evolve constantly. So why do we have this tendency of remaining in the point we are? So what movements this whole process is how much we awaken and the degree of our aspiration and our understanding that we need to evolve. And perhaps a good news for some and not so good for other temperaments, this is inevitable. And for being inevitable, the sooner we are able to understand the process and the mechanism and which could or should be our attitude, the more constructive these moments will need, and we will no longer need tests and challenges. A continuous a spirit always moving ahead, which would bring a feeling of peace that we wouldn't experience in a different way. What is important in this process, and we should watch an aspect of ours, which is, as we are reincarnating beings, we bring a certain ambition, a certain spiritual ambition from many lifetimes, which could have generated from other lifetimes tests to advance more quickly. So with this ambition, we may have created many artificial situations which, as they were out of moment, they found us totally disorganized. We weren't in the moment of living that. We created that artificially with our ambition, and this disorganized our whole process. So when these moments, which we call tests and challenges, come, and when they are not caused artificially by the personality, this comes in the measure which graphically corresponds to that hand which extends to me. I welcome it, and it's going to lead me to the next step. So this is the measure of the tests and the challenge that is going to come as a part of my evolutionary process. If through ambition, mental, ego, purely processes, I make a movement and activate a challenge that is beyond that which is foreseen for me at that moment, I cannot find this rhythm, the rhythm of help, and the rhythm of reaching that point that corresponds to me at that moment. And another characteristic which is healthy and important of that which we call tests and challenges is that it's going to mobilize the best we have, the best things we have. We are going to see ourselves before the best things that we have, the best aspects we have, and we are going to perceive the points of resistance that do not allow us to take that step. So in esoteric, mystic, esoteric or even religious language, there is the term that is the guardian of the threshold. So this guardian of the threshold is a gathering of all those characteristics or experiences of ours that are less evolutionary, which have resisted the process of transformation. And in a moment like this of humanity, which is a moment for us to take an important step, as we saw in the previous lecture, all these aspects are gathered and they are like impeding us or making it difficult for us to be able to see our next step. So we are going to see here the sorts of tests that generally are placed before us, oftentimes at the same time, and then the subject of the rays, the tests and challenges under the filter of each one of these 7 rays, and also under the filter of these lineages. And sure, as it's a very dense information, it's a lot of information, it's very broad, we are going to give an initial, introductory element, and the glossary is available for those who want to deepen into these impulses as a whole. Well, as we saw in the first lecture last week in the presentation of the subject of the glossary, the axis of our awakening at this moment as humanity is our knowing or remembering that we are not only this human being, this person, that we identify. We have a higher level, a spiritual level, and very abstract levels that, as our minds don't have a reference, our minds oftentimes lose the interest of opening themselves to this and coming to know this. So we have a group which we call personality, composed by these material bodies, mental, emotional, and etherical physical bodies. This relatively integrated group is the personality. So there are very specific tests of the personality as a whole, and the most essential test for this level today is how much this personality works integrated, in an integrated way. So our physical body can be here in this room, in this transmission, and our emotional body could be connected to a different situation. It could be sad or upset about something and not be here with gratitude, with higher feelings and aspiration. In our mental bodies, they are much more gifted with plasticity, could be really somewhere else. So we are here in the transmission, and our minds somewhere else, and our emotional body another place, and our physical body is here. We just have to observe ourselves to see that this is how it works. So the tests that our personalities go through in this moment of so much stimuli, and which is so heterogeneous, is to gather our thoughts, feelings, and actions at the same place. And what aligns this is our aspiration for what is happening, for our being present. So when we are really present, we go somewhere else. We go to another sort of test, which is an intermediary test, which is what comes from ourself, something that is higher, our higher being. So they are intermediary tests. We can now perceive this movement of the personality, and the mind, the soul, or our higher being finds a more organized space to project its energies. Then we have the tests that are more located in the unconscious or on the spiritual plane, which we don't identify generally, and we don't know where they come from, but we know they come from deep levels, and when they come from deep levels, they mobilize us. So it's very important for us to learn how to identify all these levels within ourselves, because the tendency of our mind, of our emotional body, and our personality is our defending ourselves and rejecting everything we don't know. So it is this attention to inner life, this opening to deep levels, is going to allow us to, at a certain point, become familiarized with that which comes from our depths, and this very characteristic moment in this work with tests and challenges. Then we have tests of maturing. After each of this sort of test, we have the test of maturing, that which needs to make synthesis and be the place in our consciousness, the safe place to receive a higher impulse. Contextualizing that, we understand that those who are following the lecture have this interest of knowing themselves and make a higher, direct and simple search. And this maturing comes to consolidate the alignment of a certain level with a higher level. So it's a very important sort of test, these tests of maturing. We have a test that nowadays all of us are going through, which is a test of confirmation. What is a test of confirmation? When we have, before the challenge, the test or daily life or our own consciousness confirm a decision we have made, and this comes back. We have experienced this, or we may go through this every day practically, and we find something in us that is unprepared or not so steady before a decision made. So this is why it's so important for us to be careful with that which is spiritually described as the energy of prudency in spiritual search. So as we are going to see today, the sixth ray, which is one of the seven rays, this has this movement of the emotional body that is very active, and it tends to be very impulsive. And before tests, it tends to put us into trouble. Steps that we later on won't be able to sustain. So when this moment comes of confirming ourselves, we don't even remember the energy we had to make that decision. We don't deepen into the repercussion of that. Then another test and challenge that is very much of our day-to-day and which is very important. Therefore, let us value more each day of our existence, because in our day-to-day, the situations of our day, lies the measure of our steps. Let us not be waiting for great moments of great events, because our evolution takes place day by day at each moment. The test of discernment. We are placed in the face of duality or dualities and the capacity of discerning and deciding. So these tests of confirmation, challenges of confirmation and discernment are very important. And our personality, our immature personality, thinks that once it has taken a step, the step is taken. But it doesn't work so much like this. We make a decision, we decide something, and we have to mature that process until it becomes a consistent nucleus that has an experience to receive the code of that decision and to be able to receive an even stronger and more profound code. So these are two important sorts of tests, the test of confirmation and discernment. And something in us that is less mature tends to interpret this as an attack sometimes. But you see, I have decided myself about this. Why is this coming again? Because you are still maturing. You are maturing. So if in a childish and immature way you want this to be ready without being mature, it is indispensable that this test and challenge will come to you. So we will finalize to make your decisions homogeneous. And the basis for all of this is to have gratitude and inner silence. Gratitude, which is this initial acceptance, is an inner attitude that things are like they are, and they have come just as they have come, and from this reality, it is from this reality that I'm going to evolve, and not a supposed condition that I would like it to be the ideal for me to evolve. So in this context, gratitude has this sense, and silence in the sense of this neutrality, this inner emptiness, as we will see in one of the rays, for us to avoid prejudice. So our mind, as I began the sharing of the lecture with this, it creates tags, mental tags, definitions, concepts, associations. So when a situation emerges, prejudice emerges together with this. And there lies a key, an impulse, an important test that we reject because we interpret this in a wrong and a mistaken way. And lastly, which is something that is gradually forged and which is very difficult for all of us, is self-control, self-contenance. And have a look, the Esoteric Glossary, in the entry initiations, something is described which is very important that we are going through in this time of humanity. A sort of a stimulation to converge everything into synthesis, expansion of consciousness, to bear a higher impulse. And this self-control is only possible after a certain degree of initiation. the great majority, if not all, human beings are not initiated, so self-control is redimensioned in contenance. So I may not control something, but I can contain that this is nourished by my consciousness. Can you follow this? One thing is that I will control something, and another thing is that will come because I still do not have this self-control. But I can prevent, I can avoid nourishing this, and this will not gain its own life. So contenance is very important energy, which is only important, it's only possible when we are observing ourselves. So if we are distracted, not attentive to our evolution, we are not seeking to persist on the values that we know that they are the correct ones, everything that comes, it's either going to be disturbing, or we are not going to find that narrow doorway to go through the process and reach the other side. For this, we need contenance. Well, now we are going to approach the subject of the race and lineages so that we can begin to discover there or deepening to assimilate better this whole subject which we have had so many impulses since the foundation of this work. So that which we call the willpower, the first ray, is something very unknown for great part of human spirits because it has a very particular characteristic, which is to always tend to transcend the expression of something to go to the following point, this will that always leads processes ahead, forward. So all of us, although we don't have in our spiritual soul and human formation, we need this energy, and we can count on this energy for us to be able to evolve. This energy naturally is very characteristic in the lineage of the governors, which has a conception which is very different from the concept and the description of a governor from the human standpoint. So one thing is the governance, the lineage of governance, and something else are politics. They are very different levels, which we are not going to deepen into today, because it's not the theme for today. But we speak about governance in the sense of a lineage of our spirit, which is formed to learn to converge all of manifestation to common good and continuous evolution. This is why it's called willpower, the power of leading everything to evolution and synthesis. And this is an energy that could even disturb us because it finds resistance, attachment, so many situations. And when this energy impacts our consciousness, it makes this movement forward. We feel even spiritual violence as spiritual violence due to attachment and all this situation. So enveloping this energy of will comes a series of situations which throughout our human evolution we haven't been able to deal with the due maturity, which is the energy of power, the energy of authority, of control. These are all distortions or retentions of the energy of willpower when they find some immaturity in the consciousness. So the energy is pure, neutral, and when it finds our human nucleus of consciousness, it combines itself with our state of consciousness, and there it makes emerge, flourish, and develop that which is there as a seed or latent. So this is why the purification of character, our maturing our character is a synthesis of an enormous group of stimuli to mold that which we call character, which materializes our consciousness to make this synthesis and express a character. So our initiatives, our intentions are always permeated with will. We have to have will to do things, right? And the tests in the yoga of this first ray, or this lineage of the governance, is this test of releasing control, renouncing power, artificial power, and channeling whatever it is for common good. And it is a very disturbing exercise for human consciousness, because it is an exercise of continuously denying oneself in favor of the group, or that which it should be, or that which we should transform ourselves into. So it should be accompanied with the energy of the exercise of with the energy of will, the process of detachment and gratitude. Another aspect that emerges in the aspect of will is the absence of neutrality in the channeling of this energy. It's such a strong, directed, addressed energy, addressed to higher purpose. It's one of the few energies that puts us directly with the purpose, or not, and not processes and stages of the evolutionary process, which is neutrality, and the possibility for us to exert will without directing it or staining it or molding it to our own personal will. So we can realize it's a very distinct, a very specific energy. Just a few human spirits have this energy. Spiritually, some of us have, but in the soul, in the personality, which also have rays available, it's important for us to observe ourselves related to it. In the glossary, you can find the whole description, and also the book, The Energy of the Rays in Our Lives, also by Trigueirinho, also available in Irdin publisher, where we can find and identify ourselves with traces of these rays, because this is a basic knowledge. And not finally to assimilate that this is essential, continue to put our heads against the wall for insisting in an interpretation or a logic of understanding before life. There is nothing wrong with this, but we don't deepen into self-knowledge. So this theme of life and race reaches us, and we don't really identify them. So this lineage of the governance, which again is not external human governance, is the lineage of the spirit, is always permeated or circulated by the seventh ray, which is the ray of order and ceremonial. So uniting these two energies, which are very basic for this energy of the governors, we have a possibility of recognizing how we can spiritually be guided and invoke this will, even if we don't have this energy in us, for it to act in us, to form us and help us to be governed or ruled in the good sense, and channel our lives and existences towards evolution and common good. And also another test that is very close to this ray, the first ray, the union and coherence between internal life and external life, which we can call higher will only when this can express itself externally. If it's only something internal, an inner will, an inner wish, they are all energies that compose this willpower. But it's not. If it's not an external expression yet, it's still not the first ray. It's a more devotional movement of the sixth ray, as we will see. As this energy tends to continuously be ahead of its time, ahead the other raise not ahead in the standpoint of competition or as a main rule, ahead of always seeing the purpose and what everything must transform itself into. So there is an important energy that we call destructive. This is why it's disturbing for the personality. We know that it's an energy that has to accommodate many things because it tends to transcendence, to what is ahead, to the purpose, to the destruction of forms, even spiritual forms. So it's an energy that we must learn how to know and attest and challenge that those who have contact with the energy experiences is that it enhances destructive criticism. So instead of being an impulse to discern the distance from where I am or something is to its next step, it becomes a destructive criticism, judgment. So you see how our evolution could be flow much more and be much more harmonious if we could study the theme of the rays a little bit more and see. You see, today, try to remember how many people each one of us met throughout the day. Maybe 10, probably yes. And each one we met has a chemistry, a combination of rays that is completely different to the other. So on the same day, before finalizing, if we make a retrospective, we are in contact with the shades of different lineages and rays, but as we are not educated or skilled, or we are not nourishing our aspiration in this knowledge, in this intention of identifying all of this, many opportunities of knowledge pass before us and we don't identify them. This is why it's important for us to value each present moment we are experiencing, because there lies something that corresponds to us to learn how to develop and simulate ourselves to go through this process of moving towards our next step in a way that is harmonious as possible. So oftentimes we become stuck and we don't understand. We are stuck and we don't understand why we can't take a step. Isn't this why we are crystallized in some point? When something is going to transcend our expectation, such as the energy of willpower, for example, we feel disturbed. But it has nothing to do with us. It's the evolutionary process itself. So this topic, race, lineage, tests, and challenges, is very important for us to be able to understand this group that composes our human condition. And if we give the right attention to this, we love our human condition because this is what corresponds to us consciously today. Processes we can also see in the glossary, the entry asceticism. The process of rejecting doing an almost ascensional process. It's a process that is out of date. Why? Because our inner worlds have evolved. They are in a different point. We have now many more tools, so as to say, to take our steps in much more concise way than in other times. So we attract this energy of will when we consciously begin to practice something that is practically impossible from the human standpoint, which is stop asking for. When we are asking for light, for blessings, for graces, for mercy, for money, for a husband, for a wife, for a car, while we are in this asking, we are not attracting willpower. When we become empty, it is that this vacuum, this emptiness is going to attract this will, and it's going to bring to our experience whatever we need. This is why it's an energy that is very difficult to develop. So let us ask ourselves today, before we go to bed, how many things I asked for today? No one is judging, right? But this movement, this continuous asking for material and subtle, abstract and spiritual things is related to this more immature aspect of the energy of will. So if we want to attract this willpower, we have to learn how to stop asking for and trust that this intelligence, God, the universe, whichever way each one can accept, understand, or experience, much better than us what we are supposed to live. And the law of karma that we studied in the previous lecture brings what we need in the precise measure. So do we know better than the karma what we need? Have a look at the entry pride. So this mental body of us is a body that is permeated with the energy of pride. We all think we know what we need. But let us do a practice of stopping asking for that which we think we need. And eventually, at a certain point, it has to gain a certain consistency. Life is going to start bringing to us that which we need, and we don't need to ask for. This comes and meets us. Of course, this is a very advanced spiritual exercise. It's not for humanity as a whole, but we can observe. Because oftentimes asking so much and not being a proactive element before that which I'm asking, that is, my already living that parcel, that portion of that which I'm asking for, which is sometimes already available. We waste a lot of energy, So we are optimizing our presence, concentration, energy to the most, and this generates a certain condition for me to stop asking, because I see a construction within my life and in everything, a plenitude, and I see that everything that is happening is correct. But if I have a desire or if I have ambition for something else, I leave the present moment and I create a condition of thinking that something is better than that which is happening now, which is what most of us do. You see, right? We think that something is lacking. It's not that something is lacking, everything is lacking, but what we have is what we need at this present moment. It seems like a paradox, but it's not. Another test and challenge that this energy of will also causes in human consciousness is the wish to dominate. So we have to observe a lot, although it may be a strong verb, dominate. But let us observe our day-to-day. Don't we want to control or dominate something for our own benefit? Or if we want to transfer or project to others this very energy. So while we are in this test of controlling or dominating, they could be things that are even apparently or seemingly insignificant. This distances us from willpower and this energy of governance. Well, so when we try and we are interested of coming to know this energy of ray and this lineage, this begins to work within us, and we begin to channel in a dynamic way. We begin to channel this energy in a dynamic way to identify our next step, where this will is pointing to, and what I have to transform myself into. So it's a very essential and truly important energy, and it gradually heals in us this tendency to competition. It heals the tendency to competition, because we clearly realize that governance, in a good sense, not external government, this matrix of common good exists for everything to be able to evolve and grow together. So this childish attitude, which is competition, is naturally diluted through the contact with this energy of willpower. We are only going to see one more ray and lineages so that later on, afterwards, we can answer some questions. So we will continue in the next lecture. The second ray exists and expresses itself as a central energy of this universe in which we evolved, and is permeated by the filter of that which we call love wisdom. Love wisdom is to come to know something internally, to detect or perceive or understand or know that something exists within a whole, and this is how it is included. The ray in itself is intelligent, and when we appropriate ourselves of some characteristics of the ray, and we can include them without wisdom, love without wisdom, we create certain confusion, because we don't mature enough to see that everything is as they should be and the way they should be. And this great logic, this great universal intelligence is going to lead it to a process of transformation, and not our proactive action of love, inclusiveness, without being guided by this ray that has this inclusive tendency and the potential to develop that which we call inner understanding, understand life facts inside, not through their appearances. Some lineages accompany more specifically, or are accompanied by the second ray, which are the mirrors, which is one of the most important hierarchical lineages in this moment of human evolution, because it is a lineage that is helping our spirits to become transparent, to reflect, to mirror without interfering, without manipulating, without addressing. There is a mantra, an impulse, a sentence that says, I become that which is reflected in me. So being a spirit that is going through the school of the mirrors is going to gradually learn about this neutrality, this transparency of reflecting and being just a mirror, a reflection of this. The contemplatives are also under the energy of this love wisdom, and it's a lineage that is very important also, which has fulfilled on the planet a role of sustenance of the world in critical moments of transition, even in a silent and anonymous way, which is this process of being contemplating the action of this higher will, and only bearing this projection of higher will through the intrinsic presence of love wisdom, which is to know that each thing is at their due place, they are included in the all, and to know in words inside the stage it is developing. So contemplate is with this intention of including and knowing internally, of understanding internally. Some tests in the line of love wisdom is this tendency of including without discernment, so this more emotional movement, more emotive astral movement, including or mentally wanting to include for ideological matters, but without inner consistency, without understanding what this means, and without understanding the chemistry of the combination of what is being included. This could lead to a certain imprudence mixture of energy. So if the second ray, which is such an important ray, we have had on the planet some evolved beings who express this ray in a very precise way, such as Jesus and Buddha, for example, with different traces of the same energy. So these beings left many references to us of feelings and inner understanding, inoffensiveness, tenderness. They are not mental human characteristics. They are deep inner understanding that led them to see in perspective, to see this in a group, and in this wisdom see the process happening. So in the teachings of these two consciousnesses, we have a very pure and faithful expression of love wisdom. The lineage of the priests, also, it's a very worn word, I understand, and this is how it is, but we have to try to deepen into the process, into the state of consciousness, of matrix of what this means, which is not only to develop an external ritualistic process, a ceremony or a ritual, but this lineage in our spirit, which is to put into contact with laws of different dimensions, and the priest is like this channel, this tube, this point of connection among all these dimensions, so that these laws can be combined and be able to be expressed from plane to plane. So that which we call the lineage of the priests needs this love wisdom to be able to profoundly and internally understand the law of a higher plane and receive this law, this expression, this rhythm, and then materialize this rhythm in a ritual, an external ceremony, an external movement. And this priestly movement also happens in a life that is not religious as we understand them. When the being is in contact with different laws of different planes and materializing this relationship in external life, they are going through a priestly movement, even if they are not a priest of a group. This should be clear. This is why this matrix, this lineage of love wisdom also need love wisdom, because in this feeling of totality, in the expression of the life of the planet, of the kingdoms of nature, the kingdomists internally understand the evolutionary process, creating conditions so that there will be collaboration in this process, instead of enjoying things or exploitation, destruction, which is a very unilateral vision of human consciousness before the planet nowadays. So these are four lineages that are very much connected to the second ray: mirrors, contemplatives, priests, and kingdomists. Well, test and challenge in these lineages and also in this ray of love wisdom is the emotional and superficial understanding, which leads us to make impulsive, superficial initiatives based in superficial understandings, and it doesn't have the consistency that wisdom should promote in this sort of situation. And a test that incides into aspects that are less mature of love wisdom is the lack of transparency. The lack of transparency, not only as we understand this expression, not being transparent, but our not being pure enough so that what is reflected in us may be reflected in a pure and transparent way, in an immaculate way. So lack of transparency, this difficulty as a mirror being of reflecting these energies that project themselves within us, so due to the lack of transparency, due to the immaturity of the lineage in us or the second ray in us, this gains stains for something that we put together there, which is not precisely an image or precise reflection of that which has been reflected within us, into us. And also this tendency of retaining energies or attachments is also very characteristic to this ray, because this ray, as let us understand, rays are not people. Let us not be confused. So we could have a temperament of the second ray and traces of the second ray, but the ray is not the person. None of us can contain the energy of a ray. So the ray itself, as it has the possibility of seeing everything, love, wisdom sees all. The beginning, everything ready, the beginning, the process, and the end. This is why it has inner understanding. It sees the beginning, the process, and where it has to get. As it sees it all, sometimes it understands it as a process of understanding, of retaining for self in the stage. All of us have love, wisdom in some degree, some body, because our material bodies are also impelled by the energies of ray. So our mental body has a ray, our emotional body has another ray, our physical etherical body another ray, and our integrated personality generally is another ray. So it's important to see this perspective of challenges and tests under the standpoint of race and lineages, because sometimes it's not something that it could be considered a challenge or a test. It's just lack of self-understanding. There is a shock of energy, and the shock of energies that we experience today, it is our inner worlds are trying to permeate our personalities with the ray of the personality. However, as our personality is still dissociated, many of us are here with the emotions here and the thoughts there. We are here looking and the feeling is there and the mind is the other side. So when the mind or the soul or the universe brings an energy to permeate our personality with the ray that's going to be the basis for our whole higher evolution, they find a situation that is pulverized or dissociated. And it tries to gather this ray tries to gather this, and this pressure we feel is also the pressure for our being able to put these rays at the right place and do the synthesis. But we don't even know rays, and we are not interested. So we experience situations that could have different connotations, not of feeling bad or disturbed, but it's actually the metabolism of the rays that is taking place in us and the movement of the energy. So this is why it's important to study these entries. One very constructive characteristic of the second ray, love, wisdom, is this aspiration, this continuous intention to find alignment, to be in accordance with the plane, with the higher idea, with that which our lives from the higher standpoint could be transformed into. So this aspiration of obtaining wisdom, knowledge, coming to know the truth. So you see how many times a day, in the face of what has happened, this is the third time I speak of this. Why? So we may value our lives as they come, as they are. For sure, if we had our aspiration active during today, this aspiration of knowing the truth and wisdom behind the facts of the day, we would see that the energy of love, wisdom is available for this. But if we don't discover where this energy is in us, how we can invoke it, how can we ask for wisdom, light for the facts of life, to try to identify the truth behind that fact. This is what makes us evolve and learn. It doesn't come from outside. From the outside. So let's see now if we have questions. In the next sharing, next Saturday, on the 22nd, we are going to continue with the same subject to conclude with the other lineages and also the other race. Yes. We have a first question of Rosane Almeida. How can we know which is our lineage? First of all, we have to have an intellectual, conceptual basis of the lineages for us to minimally and basically know the enunciation of the lineages and begin to observe the day-to-day. If the moment has come, this is why I was saying we should not with ambition look for these spiritual matters. We should aspire and trust that what is supposed to come to us will come. And our offering to be able to come to know the lineage is to study the statement, how it expresses itself, have interest on all of this, and mainly accept that we are not this that we see on the mirror only. This is the most external and shallow expression of our consciousness, because if we don't have as a base, a premise, we are spirit and a being evolution, we could be confused and think that the lineage is our person, that we are the lineage, and we want to imprison something that is free, that is deeply spiritual, something that goes much beyond what we can retain and understand. So in synthesis, this is what it is. In the glossary, we have the description of the lineages. We have also many recordings of Trigueirinho about this in Irdin publisher. And this is our way of making an offering. Now, 2 questions. The first one, Friar, how to discover which ray we are lacking? So it goes a little bit in the same direction. We have much more information on rays than the lineages. We have a book only about the 7 rays. We have also many recordings about the rays. And if we have at least the statement about the rays, and we begin to observe ourselves and others, this learning experience is very fast. Oftentimes what we lack is what others manifest and which disturb us. Oftentimes what others manifest disturb me and generate a movement. It could be a thermometer for me to see that the energy that others are expressing are lacking in me. So eventually a more immature personality could enter this movement of competitiveness and jealousy. It's a way of understanding. In the glossary, in this book, there is a lot of information. So once we know the statements of each of these energies and take notes, and we are interested about this, everything clearly shows itself. Another question, how to understand these energies in our lives. So rays manifest life, so it's not a matter of understanding the rays, it's a matter of living them. And as we adhere to the expressions of the rays, we are going to understand inside. It's not a matter of a mental understanding, it's a matter of really experiencing the rays. Another question of Rosiana Almeida. As we understand our ray and lineage, what should we do? In reality, very hardly we will understand and comprehend our lineage at the stage stage is just a process of awakening. We are beginning to have contact with this, and as we allow ourselves all of this to be reflected onto us, all of this gradually leads our consciousness to evolve. So what we do with this? We should put it at service of common good, of evolution, at the level we can understand this from the most human plane to the rings, circles, and environments with which we interact. Everything that is spiritual always comes to give quality, to permeate what we do with higher states of consciousness. It will never be a tool or instrument of protagonism, of self-affirmation. Lineages and race do not exist for this. Another question from Nici Ribeiro. When we discover the ray and we don't correspond correctly, does the energy leaves and we create karma? Yes, there is a law called the law of economy, which is also in the glossary. So it's not the economy from the economy of the world, but it's an economy of the universe, so that the impulses are not wasted. So if we have contact, or if we manage to know through some way that our spirits, our monads, are in the school of some lineage, very well. If we don't correspond to it, could also be an interpretation of the personality. Could not be real. It could be our interpretation that we are not complying with this. First of all, because it's very elevated, very hidden. And those of us who eventually have had contact with this and have some information or have perceived an affinity for these lineages, correspond at this moment should reflect into you. But if you create expectation and you say you haven't corresponded, you have two problems for yourself. You created expectation and you then frustration. This is why spiritual life should be simple, honest, transparent, a life of gratitude, silence, of living that which is before us in the proportion it comes to us. Always aspiring, doubtlessly, aspiration creates a lot of condition for what comes later, but if the energy leaves, it depends, because as this energy is intelligent, it goes to our consciousness, to our experience of life through a cycle. It brings an impulse, it goes back, it gives an impulse for a cycle, and if this cycle passes and it's not being assimilated, it leaves. But we should understand from this standpoint of the universe and evolution, it's not a penalty or a punishment or condemnation when an energy leaves. It leaves even to prevent us overstimulation to a level that is not accompanying that stimulus. So it needs to leave so that level can breathe a little bit, do its own process, and eventually have that stimulus again, or not, and close that cycle in another moment, or in another lifetime, or in the universe, have that impulse again. It's a very generic answer. One more question. When we internally receive a lineage, how can we internally begin to work with this? Everything that is higher is intelligent. Not intelligent as we understand it, of assimilation of contents. Intelligence in the sense of there is a purpose, a development, and a final objective. So energies are intelligent. So if a lineage is really active in us, in an intelligent way, it's going to lead at the level of our precarious and limited human channel. It's going to promote an expression of a trace, a nuance, shade for us to serve and radiate something that corresponds to something. And again, it's a spiritual energy. So we understand the energy is intelligent. Everything that comes from within and from our depths is intelligent and has a program. This is why our opening to high life, to knowledge, to esoteric knowledge, in this case the glossary, we have to have a lot of humility and have a healthy process of approximation to all of this, and know that everything that corresponds to us will come. What we need to find will come. We could give many examples here. Even the ways people arrived in Figueira, only to conclude, in the 1990s, we printed in a newspaper, and the newspaper fell on her head when she was walking on the street, and then she came to Figueira, a very unusual way of the universe of communicating with us. But didn't different newspapers came on our heads and we didn't see? Probably they did. So who knows, perhaps tomorrow, after this lecture, not looking for the newspapers from the heavens, because this is not the case, but symbolically, life could be placing before us the impulse on our measure, the right measure for us. But what attracts this is our aspiration, our ardent and true desire to grow and serve life and the common good. Very well. So we'll continue next Saturday on the 22nd with the same topic to conclude it. And visit the website of Irdin website. We have many recordings, books, lectures. The glossaries is this place of synthesis. So let us continue studying, and then let's see, after concluding this theme, how we would continue to respond to that which is necessary. Thank you all, and good night.